Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Under the Macroscope, Skybound Capital's regular podcast series, where we look in some detail, not minute detail, at some of the macro issues affecting economies globally. And this time out, it's great to welcome back to the podcast series a member of Skybound Capital's research team, Ross Muller, who's taken a particular interest in all things cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFT related. Ross, it's been probably just over a year since we spoke on the podcast series last, and an opportune time to really take stock of what's been a fascinating period for this space. And perhaps for something of a soft landing for you on the podcast today, we could take a look at the past year in review and what developments we've seen in the space.
Hi, Matt, and thanks for having me back on the podcast. It's great to be here. Thank you. In 2021, we witnessed an explosion of the crypto economy, including DeFi, NFTs, play-to-earn gaming, and the metaverse-related opportunities. We saw Bitcoin hit $1 trillion in market capitalization, with some noticeable events such as Bitcoin tipping and China banning Bitcoin mining. We also saw a huge growth in Web 3.0 developers moving across to the Web 3.0 ecosystem. Roughly 18,000 active developers were in projects. 2,500 of these developers were in DeFi projects alone. We saw the growth of layer one protocols because some of the protocols were struggling, like Ethereum and the high gas fees. So we saw Solana and Avalanche and Optimism come to the party to solve those solutions. We also saw, really big countries like El Salvador accept Bitcoin as a legal tender. To give you an idea as well, there's about 3.8 million Shiba wallets in El Salvador that hold Bitcoin amongst its people. To give you an idea, that's a very stark contrast to their bank accounts, which only have about 1.9 million users. And so this has been a big adoption for them and something big for the ecosystem.
Ross, you've thrown into your first answer there a few acronyms and sayings that many might not be familiar with and many who want to know more about the space. So can we start with DeFi? For the uninitiated, they might think that's a popular brand of white goods, electronic goods. Of course, it's not the case. We're talking about DEFI, DeFi, decentralized finance. What are we talking about there?
So in short, Matt, it's a catch-all term for a group of financial tools built on the blockchain. The idea is basically to allow anyone to access and to lend, borrow, and bank without going through the banks and having these middlemen in the middle. It's an acronym for decentralized finance, away from the traditional finance, which we call TradeFi. So this is a big sphere, but I think if we took a step back even, what we are seeing now is the dawning of a new era even. And this dawning is creating really big opportunities. If you just think about how we used to transact with digital media, we used to have our Sony Walkmans. I remember I had a yellow one that, used to put around your belt. And
very stylish,
and even CDs, so that was a thing of the past. And now all we do is we have Spotify and MP3 and Netflix. So how do we do this, right? And this is the lead into the Web 3.0 initiative that we spoke about. Is the truth is we are forced to actually rely on these systems that are heavily locked down, like walled castles, and closed off from everything else. The money actually rarely moves, and all the movies are technically being rented, and our music is all rented and just a license to the real thing. We're generations of people just renting now, and I think people are losing this idea that we own them, but technically we don't. So I think what we're seeing now is Web3 is trying to break down this walled castle and try and give the ownership back to the people. While I understand that people need rules and infrastructure to maintain, a healthy economy and, rules of law, but I think there's a way around this. And some of the readings that I've seen, specifically from Kathy from ARK Investments, she breaks them down into three tiers: the money revolution, the financial revolution, and the internet revolution. So under the money revolution, we have Bitcoin, and under the financial revolution, we have DeFi, and under the internet revolution, we have Web 3.0. And I think with these three tiers, we're going to see a lot change in the next few years.
Okay, some more detail there, please, Ross. You've mentioned Web 3 or Web 3.0 as you've termed it. What is it exactly, and why should people be taking more interest in it?
So Web 1.0 was all about accessing static pages and only had read-only functionality. We then moved along into this Web 2.0 that most of us probably know, the Facebooks, the Airbnbs, and this was about interactive social experiences within these closed ecosystems, but all your data was owned by these centralized companies. The Web 3.0 is all about digital ownership and handing this digital ownership back to the original owner and making sure that he can transact and operate inside this decentralized environment.
So it's clearly a step, one of many, towards returning to ownership as opposed to renting, which is a concept that you've referred to on the podcast already. I suppose NFTs fit that bill to some extent as well. You're offering ownership of, or even part ownership of, particular art forms or creations. Tell us about that, NFTs. What are they? Why are they such a big trend? And where have they moved to since inception?
So an NFT is a non-fungible token. It represents a unique asset with characteristics that are particular to it. It cannot be interchanged or replaced by another equivalent token. The NFT industry has really entered a new era during 2021, and we saw about $17.6 billion traded in 2021. As you said, some people might see these random art images and very weird, pictures of bored apes, pudgy penguins, to name a few. And some of them really are ludicrous. And I do feel that some of them, or majority of them, are probably going to fail. But there really is becoming this world where people value these pictures and these artworks. But the bigger play is actually on the infrastructure that's been built on the back end of all these NFTs. You're now finding front-facing interfaces, aggregators, file storage companies, layer one infrastructure. And these companies are actually solving a lot of unique things that are inside this ecosystem. As you can see by the NFT stack that we have here on the page, there's a lot going on in the background than the average person probably is aware of. And I think this is quite important because these are companies that have revenue generating assets and are working on really unique infrastructure. So I anticipate this ecosystem to grow quite big. As I said, it's $17 billion. It's dropped down now, roughly 2.6 billion in December 2021. But I think that the real use cases are going to come about when people start putting unique assets on the blockchain, like real estate, and probably start using it for gaming as well, as we've seen a big increase in.
Like with any innovation, and many times we've seen this in the world of technology, there end up being almost more questions when you do a podcast like this. You're introducing concepts that to some seem outrageous in many ways, but more and more people are transacting in this way. So I think an important part of this podcast is to say to listeners, how can they get in touch and find out more? I mean, are you happy to take questions which you put into the research team, for example?
Sure, Matt. Yeah, we enjoy being challenged as well. We may not have all the answers. By far, this ecosystem is growing so much and so fast. We've worked with a lot of partners and we've collaborated on a lot of things. Last time we spoke, we did the Dale Steyn NFT, and that did really well. We were very successful in that. And likewise now, really good opportunities are coming our way because we're open to discussion. So please, by all means, send us info or questions.
So let's put some contact details up on the side of the podcast as well to get in touch with you and the rest of the team. I've said this to you before, Ross, and either at the coffee machine or on a Teams call, I've said, often, again, in spaces like this, it's difficult for those who aren't tracking it almost on a daily basis to discern what is truth and what is fiction. So I have to ask you, really, what for you are the good places to go? I mean, where are you establishing what you believe to be your best access to the truth on this space and how it's evolving?
Oh, Matt, this is such a great question. Literally, there's a term for this in the crypto world. It's called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And some of these crypto companies create this. Make sure you're going to get listed quickly. Let's buy. You're going to be the last one. If you don't get it, you're going to lose out. This is this fear that you're going to miss out on these transactions. So in my eyes, I try and stay away from these sort of news articles and these pump and dump scams. The reality is, go back to the original website, find the white paper, find the team, research the team, figure out who's leading it. Are they legitimate? Do they know what they're talking about? You can delve a little bit deeper even and find the developer papers that people are working on these tokens. People commit repositories to GitHub, and so you can actually see the code if it's being submitted and if people are reviewing the code. Also, other things are, have the companies been audited? Are they just a fork off from an existing blockchain? Are they on the existing blockchain that's been audited? There's so much that you can do on your own without listening to some know-it-all guru on Twitter. So I would really encourage you to do your own research, find out all the info you can, and if it's to our clients and partners, we're happy to have a discussion, and maybe we can figure it out together as well. We're really excited about new technologies, but sometimes these things are Ponzi scheme from the get-go. So yeah, just be careful out there.
So Ross, given the extent of your research in the space, so what is the sort of near-term and medium-term future for not only Bitcoin, but the whole crypto space as an industry, and your key takeaways for now?
Matt, I think it's safe to say that cryptocurrencies are here now. They're not moving anywhere. Countries are regulating them. We're seeing more adoption. And so in my eyes, I think in that part, we're looking, in a stable environment in terms of acceptance. According to ARK Investments, Bitcoin has some significant upside. If we can use some examples, I mean, if we use the end of December valuation of $1 trillion, that's a very small piece of the current, market cap for all asset classes. If you look at global real estate, that's roughly $220 trillion. Global bonds, $124 trillion. So, if we have some acceptance into Bitcoin, maybe let's say at $28 trillion, what would that make Bitcoin's value per Bitcoin? Now, let's keep in mind that there are only 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined by the time they're finished mining. There's still got to come a lot of institutional investors. We've got to see a lot of uptake. And what I present is some of these use cases. We have the remittance network, emerging market currencies, nation-state treasuries, corporate treasury, and even the possibility of institutions using it as digital gold, as it's always been termed. Now, if we allocate some of this money to this ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem specifically, ARK Investments come up with a valuation of Bitcoin of about $1.36 million per Bitcoin. Now, that could happen 10, 15 years, 20 years from now. But I think the acceptance of it and the realization that some of these institutions have clients who want access to this, unique new asset class is going to force them to take it on. And even if we have half of this acceptance in these use cases presented here, that gives us a $700,000 roughly Bitcoin price. Even at $100,000, that's still potentially significant upside the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's just the way of seeing, the use cases and real life presentation of this. And I quite like this layout because it gives you some validation that there may be a potential out there for this to go further. And I think it's got some good infrastructure and some good use cases. So, yeah.
Well, it's fascinating, as always, to get your views and the product of your research. And I know you're going to just keep digging and burrowing into every corner of this world. So, as we said earlier in the podcast, please do get in touch if you'd like to discuss any of these developments with Ross or members of the team, because it is a space, as I mentioned earlier, that they take seriously, and they're always looking for trends. But perhaps the best advice is that if you don't understand it, then seek more information and don't go near until you've satisfied yourself, because it is an ever evolving world. Ross, as always, thanks so much for your time. Do feel free to get in touch via email or via Skybound Capital's website. All the past editions of Under the Macroscope are available on the website, and you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and the Google podcast platform for Android. We look forward to your company again, and until next time on Under the Macroscope, thanks for joining us.